All right. Welcome back. Contractor Talk with Richie Kidwell, building damage experts, every Saturday right here at 12 p.m. to 2 p.m. on iHeartRadio. And if you're just now tuning in, sorry about your luck. If you just now found us, thankfully you have. Bounce on over to our Facebook page, Contractor Talk with Richie Kidwell. We do podcast this show. We do stream it out through other, ways of streaming. I don't even know the way that we push it out through Spotify, iTunes,
right.
YouTube, those types of things.
All of it. Spotify, YouTube, Overcast. We worldwide, baby.
All right. Is that getting audio or is that getting the podcast too?
Oh, I don't know. I would hope that it's getting everything for sure. I mean, we're going to have to talk to our department over there to make sure that it's...
That's what's up.
Oh, yes.
We're just now getting the swing of things. So we record the audio on Tuesday before the Saturday show comes out. So we're not a live radio station, but live on the air, rather. But if you do want to hit us up on a specific topic you want us to talk about on the radio, which will air on Saturday, and it'll also go live on our podcast, we'll be happy to take on those requests, those questions, any clarification. As you've heard through what we've talked about over the past episodes here on Contractor Talk with Richie Kidwell, we talk about the laws, we talk about industry knowledge here as it results in insurance-related claims. We talk about damages as it results to it, what to do, who to contact. We have folks on, contractors, roofers, public adjusters, attorneys. Today, in a couple segments from now, we have Construction Angels, or a nonprofit agency or an organization that gives money to folks that have their loved ones have passed away in a construction incident. So it's they can apply right online and get the assistance that they need right away. So it's a great industry that we live and work in. And so we talk to you, the consumer, just so you can have the knowledge, the understanding of, you don't have to be alone fighting this, and that's what it ends up being. And Hans can attest to this, how a lot of these insurance claims, and as you know from the market, just being with this fake crisis coming on about there being an insurance crisis. And we're going to get to this here with this article I want to bring up on the reasons why we've had insolvencies or why we have insurance troubles and why the reasons we're having so much increases in our premiums and seemingly less coverage. Coverage, higher premiums.
I mean, so I was going to say there's certainly a crisis of premium.
Yeah.
But that's obviously allowed. The insurer presses for it. Office of Insurance Regulation allows it. So the crisis to the consumer really doesn't view themselves as having a policy crisis or things like that, even though they in fact are having a policy crisis. They just haven't learned it yet until their next loss. But certainly that there is that there will be a crisis at that point that they'll realize. For them now, it's just a crisis of pocketbook.
Really, right. I mean, and I love what you said on a prior show. You said, listen, I wouldn't be hung up on looking at all the policy coverages on there. More or less look at the exclusions, and understand what you don't have at first. I think that's great advice, and start looking at the things that say either an N for no, because they have a little column over to the right. So then it would be like Y for yes. Like, do you have volcano coverage? Yes. Sinkhole coverage? No. Wind coverage? Maybe. And so, but they'll either, and I swear I saw one citizens policy after Hurricane Irma in Key West, and it had a wind exclusion. I was like, I'm sure we can help you out. And just for me, I'm not an attorney or an insurance agent, but I said, listen, I can't tell you what your coverages are. I'm going to tell you if I can take on this assignment, yes or no. So he pops out this policy. It's a wind exclusion. I was like, I can't. You can pay me cash, no problem. But he ended up doing paying me cash out of pocket to help him out, and we did. But I was like, you're kind of, you bought a bad policy. So I love that advice. Look at the exclusions that you have, because they're getting worse and worse every day. If it's not a managed care provider program where you get a quote unquote discount, but you have to use their managed care provider, then it's some other exclusion or a cap, like $10,000 water cap.
And one thing to keep in mind too with that, as part of that advice, like Richie said, is you bought a bad policy. What really happened is someone sold you a bad policy. You bought what someone obviously or potentially recommended to you and said, oh, this will be good. Now you may make a value decision and say, well, I want to save $1,000 a year, so I'm going to have no wind coverage, when that's going to be, generally speaking, the only thing that's going to happen to my house in Key West is either it'll flood or the wind's going to blow it down.
That's right.
But again, be cautious when the agent says, oh, you should be okay. Now, if you want to go in and say, look, I'm going to spend as little as possible, the reality is you're going to get as little as possible when it comes to coverage, when it comes to time to need it. So if you're going to essentially self-insure yourself, which is what happens there, so you may save yourself, and do just general numbers under Citizens policy with wind exclusion, maybe save yourself $1,000 a year, and money's money, and we realize that. But the devastation of a single storm, devastation of a small storm, is many, many multiples of what that savings may be. If you got sold it, then it's one thing. But if you bought something like that, you have to be more cautious. And if you're going to be sold a policy, you want your agent to tell you what we talked about, which is, okay, I see a big number on the front, right? On the declaration sheet, you'll see coverage A for your home, and it'll say dwelling, it'll say $400,000. And you're like, yeah, I got $400,000 worth of coverage. Well, the odds are you'll never see that money unless your house burns to the ground or is blown away like the Wizard of Oz.
Yep.
But there will be exclusions and limitations and everything that will limit your ability to get to that money. So you see the big number on the front and you go, oh, that seems pretty good. That seems like a fair number to replace my home, without realizing that because of the way the policy is set up and devised by the insurance company, you'll probably never see that kind of money anyway.
Yeah, and that's unfortunate because you do feel like you're in good hands. You feel like you have a good neighbor.
Yeah.
One of my good friends, she owns a State Farm agency, and when I had that fire next door at my at a yoga studio that my wife runs, I mean that was an S show. It wasn't good at all. It turned out bad, and she was doing her best to help, but ultimately the carrier is the one that makes the decision. They are just the agency for them, trying to make you feel you are covered. You do have the right policy for the coverages, but you really need to look at it and say, okay, well, let's look at every major event that I need to be covered for. What if I have a fire? What if in this case, what if there's a fire next door and water comes over to my side? What am I covered for? Well, they put it all under contents. And they're like, well, your flooring is content. I'm like, are you kidding me? So the drywall is content. And I'm like, no, it's not. It's from the event,
right?
Cause and effect of this. And so anyways, the story behind that, it just, or the takeaway from that is like, I'm pretty savvy when it comes to that. So I was able to get the max, out of that. I'm still, they still owe me half of what my actual costs were to replace and repair the damages from the fire next door. But when you're looking at your thought and your policy and your maybe homeowner's policy, that was a commercial policy. But in your homeowner's policy, you think you're like, if I have a flood, if I have a crazy wind event, hurricane, that's what we're exposed to here. Fire, are we covered? If I got struck by lightning, one of our employees had a lightning strike on it, and they're contesting certain things.
Oh yeah,
I mean it's clear as day. It's a pretty new house. Lightning strike fried majority of the stuff, and they're underpaying them. I have another friend that had a fire in our neighborhood, not too far from you, and their insurance company sent out an engineer and sent a waiver and said so we're just waiting on. We do admit coverage.
Right.
They should. It was a fire.
Yeah.
They sent out an engineer and they said as soon as we get back the engineer report with their scope, a third-party engineering scope is basically doing their job to tell them, and then we'll get back to you and we'll let you know what we're covering and what we're not covering.
Well, it's interesting on the lightning strike, on a lot of that coverage now, they will cover, let's say, a television. They'll cover the television, but not the electronic circuitry. So, I mean, the more typical...
That's inside the television?
Yeah, the more typical exclusion now for lightning strike and electrical disturbance is they'll cover the thing, but not the circuit board. So unless I'm buying a circuit board for my television, I mean, it's some crazy stuff. There's a lot of things like that when you get in those policies.
Yeah.
Again, it's not what it appears on page 1.
Right. And again, you think you got full replacement cost value on that. You need a television that works, replace the one that didn't work. That's interesting. So we'll talk more about exclusions, to insurance policies here with Hans Kennon with Morgan & Morgan, breaking down policy exclusions, those things you really need to talk to your agent about and make sure you have the right coverage. At Contractor Talk with Richie Kidwell. We'll be right back.